Love that little echo. That was
yes.
added to the ambience, I feel.
Yeah.
Roger,
I did that mistake on purpose. I did that mistake on purpose.
Evening, everyone. Now, I just want to say,
everyone.
Dave, right? I think that Dave has got a time machine, because Dave travels back in time and posts first at 6:30, even though it's only just 6 p.m. Very, very clever stuff, Dave. Like your style. Hello.
Could be the next Doctor Who, couldn't he?
I was going to say that. Yeah, the next Doctor Who. Yeah.
So hello, everyone. So we've got Dave, we've got Deb, Bernie B, and Philip so far. Say hello if you're in the chat, and we can say hello to you.
Hello from sunny New York. Yeah, it's been a sunny Dublin today. What about you in the UK, as they call it, and Greece?
Oh, it was sunny here.
Well,
here too.
Usually is, isn't it? So
we had mixed. We had a big load of rain when it wasn't meant to be raining. So
it's a hard
yeah,
line.
we did.
That's
we had rain this morning,
and then it got nice.
You affect up your weather with Brexit, I reckon. So
it's affected up everything.
Affect up everything. Yeah.
But people would rather die. People would rather die than have a Romanian living in the same street. This is the thing. And maybe quite a few of them will, with a bit of luck, you know. There we are.
Yes. So people, we're finally getting round to doing the last of our 3-part sessions on the climates and the do we have time to even do animal liberation and all the rest of it. And so we've got Pamela from Animal Justice Emergency, and that Ronnie guy is back as well, as you can see. So welcome both of you as guest panelists. And so Pamela, I think we're going to probably I'll just have a little recap. So this is the famous document that we've been working on. So I think this is back to page 1. So yeah, I mean, do you want to just lead us through a little recap, or
yeah, sure.
Is there anything else that anybody needs to say before we start, or what?
I'll just recap, shall I? And then people can ask any questions or ask for any questions.
Okay. Give me the heads up when you need the page turned, Pamela, please. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So great. Well, thanks for having me back on the show. And so, looking at catastrophic climate breakdown and seeing that it is an animal liberation issue, the first element that we need to look at is its impact on free living beings. Okay, because a lot of vegans and animal rights and animal liberationists get like a bit sort of like, oh, well, you know, it's a human issue. It's not really about the animals. Dirty. Well, it is totally about the animals, particularly if you start off thinking about the free living beings. So I'm just going to quote, because we've already covered this in the first episode, I'll just sort of like go through it quite sort of like quickly. Just some examples of the impacts of catastrophic climate breakdown on free living beings. And the first example is more than 1 billion sea creatures across the Pacific Northwest perished in this year's heat wave. And that's just a taste of what to come. This is a piece from The Guardian, and the Pacific Northwest is obviously United States. And basically, a marine biologist was alarmed about the concept of how bad the heat waves were. And he was alarmed and intrigued. So he went off to this bit of the sea. And then it said that he was intrigued and alarmed, first of all. Then came the smell, and his feelings somberly shifted. It was this putrid smell of decay. Across hundreds of miles of coastline, the extreme heat baked the barnacles, seaweed, and small creatures exposed to the elements along the shore. Starfish that failed to crawl to shadier spots were cooked alive. Mussels lay agape along the rocks, the tissue crisped between their shells. So this was in The Guardian. So, you know, they were walking across carpets of dead mussels, and initial estimates showed that over 1 billion creatures that live in the shallow waters across the Pacific Northwest perished in the heat that week. Scientists expect the impact will have a trickle-down effect on the ecosystem and other animals that rely on those that died for food, for food and habitat. And I think this is the whole sort of like systemic sort of thing. So other free living beings that consumed the barnacles or the starfish or whatever else perished, though that's going to have a cascading effect on their populations, because their primary food source is no longer there. So and then we talked there was another comment from a professor of biology at San Francisco State University who was talking about how generally sort of like free living beings are struggling to adapt, and for some the prognosis is grim. This is Jonathan Stillman, a professor of biology at San Francisco State University. This is really heartbreaking. It says his research shows that for animals that have already adjusted to higher heat, it will be even harder to adapt when the temperatures spike further. Quote, they don't have the ability to cope when the temperature goes just a little bit above the maximum that they've adapted to, he said. They can't tolerate just a little bit more. This includes small birds living on the edge of their water needs, desert dwellers who have nowhere else to go when the nights fail to cool down, and fish that aren't able to reach the areas they spawn. And one example that he gives of the fish, which is a particular colony of, this is all obviously America, United States, was a spring-run Chinook salmon in California's Central Valley were decimated by the heat after making a significant recovery following the 2018 campfire, blah, 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 blah. More than 83% of the roughly 15,000 adults in Butt Creek, the largest population of the federally protected fish, died, according to this guy. So that's 83% of 15,000 adults in a protected salmon population. And the bloke says it's devastating. He said, calling this an indicator of the severity of the drought and heat wave. It is the largest loss of adult salmon we have ever seen in the Central Valley. And this is another bit that I find heartbreaking. It's like salmon in the Columbia River farther north were also documented swimming slowly and lethargically through the overheated waters with large red abrasions and burn marks, which is just horrendous, And for those ones that were actually, they were sort of like environmental professors and biology, this, that, and the other, sort of like people surveying those populations. Obviously, in the vast majority of animals that have been affected, free living beings that have been affected by catastrophic climate change events, whatever they are, whether it's overheating, flooding, etc., they won't have been documented. So, for the billions of barnacles, I think I remember something like a number of 2 billion free living beings in the Australian bushfires. It's a vague memory. But again, these are just going to be guesstimates of what, various sort of like ecologists will have sort of like figured out. So we've got another one here. This is a report, more than a million. This one, I think actually this one is moving on to sort of like captive beings. So yeah, so that's the sort of like the population of free living beings, all the free living beings that are not taken into consideration with all these catastrophic climate change impact. And, I mean, like we've had monsoon-like rains today, like one minute it's sunny. That's why I keep looking up because I'm in my conservatory. And like the next minute, it's like battering down with like super, super, super hard. I think Ronnie was feeling that as well. Like really, really super heavy sort of like rainfall. And I'm just thinking, what about, and I've seen lots of butterflies in my garden, and I'm just thinking, is this the right time of the year, for butterflies to be sort of like flying around? I mean, I don't know. But, all these free living beings, they are up against it, and they will be more up against it, as the more extreme weather events happen, which are happening more and more and more frequently. This is the absolute, this is exactly what has been predicted by climate change scientists, that basically it's the jet stream which is stabilized by the Arctic ice mass, because that is now melting, the jet stream is completely destabilized. So what you're getting is that the jet stream sort of like stays in one place and it kind of like wiggles. And I actually heard that on the BBC News the other day. I was at a weather forecast. I was totally gobsmacked because the guy described this phenomenon, which I'd only ever heard about in the sort of like, you know, the sort of like climate change scientist, Paul Beckwith is the one that I follow. He's on YouTube. He's great. But this forecaster mentioned that the jet stream was stuck and it was like sort of like vibrating in place. That's the whole thing. That's where you get the weather, the sort of like the weather is sort of like stable or stuck for a few days. But he didn't say, as you would have thought was absolutely relevant, this is a phenomenon that climate change scientists have actually predicted. This is actually climate change. He didn't say that. And I just felt really annoyed and kind of like, it was also very surreal. You know, that it's one thing to be watching stuff about, you know, from climate scientists, sort of like talking about things like the jet stream. It's another one seeing it in your actual weather forecast from the BBC actual weather person, describing exactly the same phenomenon, like it's real, because it is real, you know.
And like it's normal, because it's becoming normal, isn't it? Yeah.
Not even saying. Oh, by the way, you know, some of you might wonder, this is actually what climate scientists have been predicting. This is actually climate change in action. This is how it happened.
Yeah.
But that was just sort of, it was only because I'd sort of been aware of this phenomenon that I sort of like, blow me down. What's going on?
Do you remember this, Pamela? I remember George Monbiot saying that, because I know he's starting his own channel, isn't he? Or his own sort of media outlet or something. I don't know the exact details of what that is, but I remember seeing a video of him saying that when he used to try to get climate change stories in the news, he used to get told to fuck off, basically, and like, are you talking about climate change again? Get out of my face. And he said he was trying for so long and the different media sort of platforms they just didn't want to know. So it's only now that it's starting to become a little bit more talked about, isn't it? So it's
the thing is, I mean, before
really.
Monbiot was even a name, you know, when I was like writing for the Guardian and pitching to the Environmental Guardian with sort of like environmental and climate change stories, and it was a different environmental editor. The current one is not too bad, but the other one, it was exactly the same thing, and that was one of the reasons that I sort of like, you know, took the decision to sort of like basically sort of like remove myself from mainstream journalism, because there's this sort of, you know, I talk about the dominant culture and the sort of like the way the sort of like media sort of like channels this, but you know, you're absolutely stonewalled. Gatekeepers don't want to hear this sort of stuff, and you don't have you know, you just can't break through. And if somebody like Monbiot, who's an ex-public school boy and the darling of, you know, he's well entrenched, can't do it, it shows how bad it is. And I'll tell you another example of that, which has been appalling me lately, is I don't know how many people have heard of the, what's it called? Insulate Britain direct action group against catastrophic climate breakdown. You heard of this one?
Yeah, the ones that are blocking the M25.
That's right. Yeah. So this
is
the latest thing that Roger Hallam, who founded Extinction Rebellion, has kind of like his latest iteration of action. So these people are all sort of like, you know, the demands, it's called Insulate Britain, is that the government insulates all sort of like social housing, you know, basically poor people who can't afford their own sort of like insulation, because, you know, with stuff with the electricity and gas rises, you know, the problematic question marks over, are we even going to have gas and electricity this winter, tra-la-la-la, you know, never mind sort of like food shortages, cuts in universal credit, tra-la-la-la, you know, that something should be done. So I've watched a couple of times now on, Good Morning Britain, one of the activists, fair play, who's an activist,
I saw that,
called Liam, being absolutely monstered by the smarmy, you know, media courtiers of the dominant culture, otherwise known as Richard Madley and whoever that woman he co-presents with. I was absolutely shocked. The first time it was bad enough, right? I watched it to the end. The second time, they actually had three people. They roped in some other so-called journalists who should be, they shouldn't be ashamed of themselves. You know, they're courtiers to the dominant culture, not journalists. So they had three of them. And this poor guy, Liam, standing his ground. And every single time he tried to actually speak sensibly about the issue, they're all like, well, supposedly there was a woman that had this a stroke in the car, and you know, she was delayed going to hospital for 6 hours. What would you say to her? You know, and every time he's trying to bring it back to sort of like, well, we're talking about, you know, thousands of people sort of like potentially sort of, you know, passed away because of sort of like, you know, or making the decision between, you know, food and sort of, you know, heating because of climate change. He was being stamped on, and then you left, you know, which I don't. And then they were basically mocking.
Yeah, there's far more people.
They were mocking and sneering at him. So this is.
There's far more.
But sorry, I'll just finish.
There's far more people dying because. Sorry, Pamela. I'm just going to say there's far more people dying because of the failure to insulate properties properly than, you know, whoever would have problems from being held up for a little while on the M25.
Absolutely, yeah. But to me, this was like such a textbook example of the media mouthpieces of the dominant culture. It was so textbook, you know. And I was thinking, bringing it back to animal rights, I could imagine exactly the same thing happening if they had somebody from some sort of like animal activists. Say there was some sort of, you know, action that had happened, you know, where maybe animal sort of like activists were sort of like blockading something or other, and then actually having quite a successful impact in terms of that. I could imagine exactly the same monstering happening from that crowd of people, because this is what happens. This is the dominant culture fighting back. You know, it was so crystal clear and so horrific. I couldn't watch it all the way through because it actually made me feel physically sick. But it was a textbook example of that. So
they were mocking him for not having personally paid for his own insulation of his house. But going back to what you were saying about journalism, Pamela, I thought that was pretty interesting in the sense that, see this bit here by Dave. In a sense, I get this feeling that, you know, by the time everybody switched on and, you know, they turned away from the Premiership or whatever, it might well be too late, you know, because everybody's now waiting for the next James Bond film type of thing. But you're suggesting that the media are the same. It's not as though they've switched on either, so they're just in the mocking stage at the moment.
Well, no, what I'm saying about the media is that they are the gatekeepers to the dominant culture. You know, they are the filters. You know, and that was another reason that really hacked me off. You know, when I was sort of like freelancing for, you know, the Guardian, the Times, you know, the Observer, I got really hacked off once I realised, you know, because I was an idiot initially. I thought, you know, it was like, you know, it depended on your good idea. And if you had a good idea and you were competent to write it, you know, and you pitched it, you'd actually get in the paper, which works to a certain extent. But then you start to realise after a period of years that they've actually got this agenda. And since most of them are like ex-public school boys and girls like George Monbiot, you know, they are absolutely, you know, they are the dominant culture. You know, they are just part of it. And once you realise that, and you've got a somewhat different agenda yourself, you know, you think, well, do I just want to sort of like churn out celebrity and health stuff, blah, de, blah, de, blah, or do I want to write about the stuff that I think is really important? And that's what I wanted to do with my journalism. So I sort of like made choices accordingly.
And even when climate change does...
Go ahead, Will.
Oh, sorry, Nella. I was going to bring Deb's comment up. That's exactly what I was just going to bring up. Is even when climate change does get brought up in the media, no one even mentions the effects of so-called animal agriculture.
That's what I wanted
is that what you
to mention?
Yes,
because here during the wildfires, the climate emergency was mentioned by politicians as an excuse for not being ready and having the infrastructure to do something about to do much about the fires. But then it is mentioned as a reality that's happening now, but as something that it's doomed to happen and we can do nothing about it, and no one is mentioning the causes. It's like, it will happen, we are unlucky, is this generation that's going to face it, accept it. That's the mood.
The thing is, there's powerful people making a lot of money out of the status quo, you know, staying as the status quo, and this is the problem. You've got those people who don't want the measures to be taken to combat the climate crisis because it would mean that they would lose money fundamentally, and the media, most of the media are their lackeys, and a lot of the media is owned by those people, and so therefore there's all this propaganda being pumped out, either that's inaccurate regarding the severity of the climate crisis, or is encouraging people not to think about it. And we have got to create our own information to counter that. Because they've got the money, but we've got the numbers. Potentially, we've got the numbers. When you think of the number of people that are vegan, for instance, the number of vegans in the country, if everyone got active in spreading the vegan message, because of course a major part of all this is animal agriculture and the industrialized fishing as well, destroying the oceans. That's a massive. I mean, according to a group called Climate Healers, animal agriculture is actually responsible for 87% of global heating, and that's because they take into account the amount of carbon dioxide that could be pulled out of the atmosphere if we didn't have animal agriculture, and a lot of places could therefore be allowed to go back to nature, to go back to woodland, because we wouldn't need that land for growing food, because the vegan diet is so much more efficient. Right, and taking that into account, it changes all the figures, you see, and so it's a vital. We have to. We can only counter this through our numbers, through being active, through getting down at grassroots level, educating people, encouraging people to look at the world in a completely different way to what they do at the moment. That's the way we respond. That's the way we respond to all this, and it's a question of who, at the end of the day, who can get people to listen the most.
Well, we're in a war situation, actually. You're absolutely right. It's a war situation. Only, there's only a few of us that actually are sort of like mobilising with the sort of right degree of sort of intensity and understanding it. And most people are living in, denial, aided and abetted by the tosh that is pumped out by mainstream media and their own desire to live a comfortable life, which I completely understand. I totally understand that. So yeah, it's yeah. And we're on page 2. We're just moving on to page 2, Roger. Yeah. So yeah, sorry, Wendy. Did you want to say something?
No, I literally was just going to say, I talk about framing it, I suppose, because I think one question that I have constantly going on my head as an animal rights advocate is, how do I frame climate crisis in a way that doesn't completely decenter other animals and is just human centric? And I suppose that's I'm constantly trying to think about that, because obviously I feel that climate crisis is obviously is fundamental, but yeah, I don't want to make my advocacy about let's stop the climate, let's do this because we want to stop the pollution and we want to stop this for our own gain, just for our own gain, although it does benefit us. But I think I constantly battle with that framing of it, because we wouldn't advocate for women's rights because it was going to benefit men. We would advocate for women's rights because it's the right thing to do, that women are respected and there's justice. Do you know what I mean? So I think that's in my head all the time. I'm thinking about this, so I don't think I really have all the answers for that. I'm just curious about what everyone thinks about it.
We're talking about the biosphere here, Wendy. This is where everybody's living.
Yeah, no, I do get that.
Yeah. I think the thing is, you have to say it as it is, Wendy. You have to say that no matter how badly the climate crisis is affecting people and will affect people, it affects free living beings massively more than that, and has been for quite some time. Billions of sea creatures, billions of land dwelling creatures that have already been wiped out because of because of the climate emergency, with the the heat, all the things that Pamela's just described, the fires, all these things, and this isn't new. This has been going on, and to be quite honest, this has been going on, for hundreds of years. In human impact on the environment has been massively destructive to other animals. In the Middle Ages, half the major forests in Europe were destroyed by the Middle Ages through human activity. Just think of how many free living beings would have lost their lives because of that. We are such a a horrendously damaging and harmful species. You've got to remember that at the time, the world human population was only 300 million. And what is it now? It's 7-something billion now. And this is how destructive humans are. And of course, what's happened is that process is now accelerating. We've already, there's all this talk about our house is burning, and we've got to run around and, kind of do all this action and, sit in the road and block things up. And, not that I oppose that at all, but where was all that when all the hundreds and hundreds of other animal species were being wiped out because of human impact on the natural world? And that's been going on for centuries. It's accelerating. It's gone on for centuries, wiped out hundreds. We burnt their houses down. Their houses. Where was everyone when their houses were being burnt down? No, well, they were doing the burning. They're doing the burning, weren't they? Setting fire to the houses of all those animals. And so this has got. And I think just say it. I say it all the time. I'm totally upfront with it. Just say it. I say it to local environmentalists. I say it to local Extinction Rebellion. That no matter how bad you think this is going to be for humans, it's other animals that are bearing the brunt of it, and it's other animals that's always borne the brunt of human impact on the natural world.
I know it's kind of almost the two sides, really, because there's that sense of wanting to frame it and put it into the animal liberation kind of language and narrative, but there's also the other side, and it's like Dave mentioned here, people won't even stop eating meat, so-called meat, to save the lives of their own children. And then you think of the other side, it's like, well, do we actually have time, given the climate catastrophe, to get people on board with ethics of the other animal situation? Because they're hardly wanting to make big changes for their own, for their own situation to be improved, or that of their own children or families or future generations. And it's like, should we be concerning ourselves with those human issues if we're going to advocate for better situation for other animals? It's a really difficult one, isn't it? Because people often don't listen and don't care.
We don't need everyone, though, Wendy. This is the thing. I mean, the fundamental answer to this, in my mind, is vegan education. It's vegan education because through educating people to go vegan, that changes their own lifestyles. That will change the impact they themselves make on the planet. It kind of also gets people to think in a different way. So hopefully it won't just be about food. It will be about other things they do that impact negatively on other animals, in terms of how much people breed, how the transportation methods people use, the energy they use, all those things as well. They'll understand that negatively impacts on other animals as well, so they'll make a difference there. So that's one side of it, but it's also how people vote, how people behave politically. And the problem is that we've basically got idiots voted in by idiots, haven't we? Or people that have been idiotized. People have been idiotized through propaganda, through brainwashing. We've got de-idiotized people through our own educational efforts. And when you think that, the government, all governments that are elected, they don't come from the sky. They're elected by ordinary people. Almost 30%. That's all it was. It's 30% of the electorate, people eligible to vote, voted in this government, and they're in power because those people voted for them. So, putting that round the other way, we'd only need 30% of people to think like us and to vote in like a kind of half decent government that would put in measures to properly combat the climate crisis and could move our society to a vegan diet. That's what it takes. And in order to get that, we've got to educate people, because we've got to educate people to behave in the right way. We've got to educate people to vote in the right way. So for me, although I think that all these things, what Animal Rebellion do, Extinction Rebellion are doing, and all these people that are kind of like doing all these protests, although I kind of think that's great, for me, vegan education is fundamental. Vegan education at grassroots level, as many vegans as possible becoming involved in it. To me, that's the most important thing we can do about this.
Well, I don't have the answers to everything, but I'll just sort of speak to Wendy's point about talking about how to frame it, first of all. And I think it is really difficult. I find myself, when I talk to, and part of my process of advocacy, as I've explained now before, is like going into sort of like local community groups. Like I went to this Saturday. One was a sort of like a community food thing, and the other one was a sort of like little activism, sort of like trying to green up the local high street one. And when I'm in those contexts and able to sort of like, it's appropriate to start to sort of like talk about things. I mean, the community food one is a climate change event, and the food was vegetarian/vegan. The thing is, it's really challenging. I think we need to sort of like just accept that it's really challenging to know how to frame these things. We don't want to leave this animal, centering animals thing behind. I think it's just a sort of, to some extent, it's a kind of suck it and see one. If you use the utilitarian sort of like, well, we're going to, because of climate change caused, largely by animal agriculture, the human beings are all going to go down the tube. So therefore, it's a good reason to, hang on a second, just got to stop my cat eating. Sorry, there's a little bit of...
Going back to what you were saying, Ronnie, I mean, that psephologists know why people vote, and they always say that they vote usually in their own, what they perceive as their own economic interest. So that's a major problem. And then going back to the vegan education bit, it seems that a large contingency of the most active vegans at the moment are the animals only people. And I'm starting to see a lot of those now saying things like that vegans should not talk about the environment and about the climate because it's nothing to do with veganism. And of course,
yeah, it's absolutely everything to do with veganism, because animals are dying. It's other animals that are the main victim of these things. That what people need to understand. That if you look at the other animal victims of human activity, the biggest area I would say of that, in terms of it's at least 50,000 animals dying every minute. That's the food industry, but human impact on the environment, adverse human impact on the environment, it probably comes a very close seconds. We've had these instances where there's billions of these free living beings, suffering and dying because of because of the climate crisis. So if those people are truly concerned about other animals, then the climate crisis has got to be like really, really high on their list. I mean, a lot of those people, are quite rightly would be concerned about animal experimentation. Animal experimentation in this country is like 3 million a year. Worldwide, it's 50 million. That's tiny. Although it's a very important issue, and I'm pleased people campaign on it. It's like, in comparison, it's tiny, compared with the number of animals that suffer and perish because of the climate crisis. And I think it's important to emphasise that to those people. You need to emphasise that to all vegans.
Well, I think the thing is, vegans are like other people. They don't. A lot of them, the majority, just don't want to think. They don't want to do the research, and they're in sort of like massive denial, And I completely understand that. And I think the other factor that I've become more aware of over the last actually, I just did a bit of extra research today. Since this whole sort of show is kind of like talking about the way that the animal death industry is sort of like climate washing. It's sort of like propaganda, to make sort of like eating dead animal bodies, seem like a sort of like a climate friendly and sustainable thing to do. And the massive PR agencies and sort of like organizations that have got together to push out these lines of climate washing. And something popped up in my YouTube feed this afternoon, and it was about an investigative piece by a German outlet, DW News, about the journalist was investigating the way that PR agencies are sort of like manipulating, like what's it called? What's the name of it? the way that who was the agency that was manipulating the Cambridge Analytica was manipulating the US elections. So this is something that is basically, this German guy was joined a sort of like a pretend, well, it was a political party, but it was a kind of a satirical political party. And he was basically punting out the notion that could any of these agencies, many of whom seem to be based in London, could they help him with sort of like, pushing sort of like certain agendas, which might be perhaps problematic and dodgy to the general public. And there's a lot of stuff going on with something called data mining, and it's all too complicated for you to understand. But basically, so it's like we the people, are being systematically data mined by entities like Facebook. And they said something like, if you like something 3 times, the algorithms can sort of like figure you out such and such an amount. If you like something sort of like 50 times, they basically know you better than your own sort of like partner or spouse. So we have to understand the reality of what we're up against. And it isn't just about personal conversations, I know they are clearly part of it. It's part of this whole sort of like horrendous sort of like neoliberal sort of soup that we're living in. And I think we just need to, I think the only way that we can sort of like move, I think we need to move forward in lots of different ways, getting into the community, talking to communities. And you're absolutely right, Ronnie, to educate people, that's clearly part of it. But within the context of all these larger things that are going on, and sort of really understand what we're up against, like the tobacco industries in the 1960s and 70s, like the Koch brothers, who have pumping out disinformation for I think about 30 odd years, on climate change. The same thing is happening in sort of like animal agriculture, the animal death industry. And, once we understand that, I think we can perhaps come up with more varied responses. I don't know. I don't think there are any easy answers. It's a horrendous situation for everybody being free living animals, and captive animals, and actually human animals as well. But obviously, human animals are like main responsible. So it's up to us to do whatever we can to perhaps mitigate it. When, that's the best we can hope for.
I'd like to come back a bit on what Roger said about the. I think it's not so much people's economic interest that they kind of take, is their main consideration when they vote. I think it's probably more their perceived economic interest, because when you think you've got a Tory government, whose economic interest is that in? Just a tiny. They're only in the economic interest of a tiny fraction of society. And yet they got voted in, as I said, by like 30% of the electorate, and even more percentage of the actual people who voted. Those people aren't voting truly in their economic interest. They've been conned. They've been brainwashed to think that is in their interest. And we've got to unbrainwash them. We've got to show them, no, it's not in your interest to vote for those people. What is in your interest is vote for people who are actually going to save the planet. Because if there's no planet, then it doesn't matter a buggery about economics, because you're not going to be around, are you? And so it still comes back to the same thing. It still comes back to the same thing about education, educating those people to think differently and to understand differently.
The thing is, do we know of any Green Party anywhere in the world that they're really stating the reasons that led to climate catastrophe, and they are willing to do something about it? Because if they are, they could go against the interests of the industries.
Yeah, I mean, Green parties are all, they're not all, their policies kind of tend to be similar. They're not all, some don't. The policies of some aren't as strong as the others. And Green parties tend to have very strong policies to combat the climate crisis. All these parties, sadly, are fundamentally still human supremacist. The amount of attention they give
to... Did everybody see what Paul from Galway said about that?
Yeah,
in Germany, the Greens were really big in the 80s, weren't they?
Yeah. But you see, what tends to happen is other parties tend to, take on board some of these policies that the Greens have if they see those policies are popular.
Yeah, you end up with a light Green set of policy and it buys people off.
You kind of do. But you see, I think the difficulty that Green parties have pretty much everywhere all over the world is the voting system, because you've got first past the post voting system, and people think that that if they vote for the Greens, it'll allow the Tories in. You see, so then people go and vote Labour instead when they'd rather have really voted for the Green Party. So what we need is some kind of transferable vote system so people are able to actually really vote for who they believe in. And then these smaller parties like the Green parties, and also these various, there are some animal protection parties, aren't there, like in various countries. Those smaller parties then would have a better chance of getting more votes and having more representatives in Parliament. So that's that's vitally important that we do change the voting system, and we're not going to get that under this present government, of course, because first past the post is in the interests of the Tories.
Without trying to derail this too much, but it is about animal advocacy in this. I just want to try and pick up a little bit on this comment here, because that was the one that I had in mind when I made my comment. I'm just going to drop that out for a little minute and just show you this, right? And so this is the latest one from I can't remember the guy's name. I mean, obviously it's Yates, but if you see the way it's framed, I think there's an interesting thing. As a vegan, we sometimes make the case for veganism based on the environmental benefits of a plant-based diet. Well, I'm not quite sure that that's what you're saying, is it, Ronnie? You're kind of saying that you can talk directly about the benefits to other animals, right?
Yeah, I'm saying that if somebody eats a plant-based diet, that has benefits to animals in two ways. First of all, it benefits the animals that would be slaughtered and would suffer to provide the food, and secondly, it benefits those free living beings that suffer and die because of the climate crisis, which is very largely caused by animal agriculture and industrialized fishing. And so it's all about the animals. It's not, it isn't, both, it's about animals in two different ways.
And we should not forget that whole species are extinct.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
But also the so-called farmed animals are also victims of catastrophic climate breakdown. So we're on page 2 now, Roger.
We're making great progress there, Pamela.
Yeah, we've actually gone backwards now.
Can you come back next week?
Example, okay. And this is again from The Guardian. More than 1 million animals reportedly died. This is like farmed animals in flash floods in the Henan province of China. More than 1 million animals. Reuters report from the village of Wangfan, where most of the 3,000 residents raised pigs or chickens, found that at least 200,000 chickens and up to 6,000 pigs, half the village's herd, had been lost in the floods, the worst in centuries. So again, that is one tiny, weeny little sort of like snapshot of the so-called decimation of so-called farmed animals by catastrophic climate breakdown. So that's another tranche of sort of like non-human beings who are being sort of like, well, just totally destroyed. That's one thing that we know about, one tiny little example. But globally, we don't have the figures because nobody's collecting the figures. They shouldn't be being farmed anyway, but they're going to be dying even more. Well, I can't even say more horribly, but they're certainly going to be dying before even the short time that was allotted to them because of climate breakdown, whether it's drought, whether it's heat waves, or whether it's floods. If you think of sort of like, sentient beings stuck in these, like say, for example, the pig hotels, what they call them, like in China, 6 stories high. If there's a heat wave there, well, they're not going to be sort of like putting air conditioning on the poor blooming pigs, are they? I mean, they're not. They're just going to be basically baked alive or something. So it's all
that
about.
was happening during the fires, wasn't it, in Australia, and then obviously more recently in Europe and in Greece as well. And Ella's been, keeping us up to date with all the fires there. That's been happening, isn't it, with so-called farmed animals, and in those situations have been getting caught up in the fires. So it's definitely happening to the captive animals as well. Horrendous.
There's something I'd like to bring up, because I don't know how long we're going on for. There's something being launched, probably several more weeks. There's something being launched called the Plant-Based Treaty, and people can find it at plantbasedtreaty.org. And it's really important that as many people as possible endorse this, because I'll read out, if I can, because it's in quite small writing, so I'll try and read it. It said, inspired by the Fossil Fuel Treaty, the Plant-Based Treaty aims to halt the widespread degradation of critical ecosystems caused by animal agriculture, to promote a shift to more healthy, sustainable plant-based diets, and to actively reverse damage done to planetary functions, ecosystem services, and biodiversity. So this is something that's kind of being, really kind of, people are trying to promote this as much as they can leading up to the COP26 thing that's coming up soon in Scotland. And organisations can sign up for this, and it's just that it gives it more weight. That the more individuals sign up to it, and the more organisations sign up to this. And obviously, it makes a huge difference to other animals if this could actually be adopted.
Interesting. I'll check that out. I Love Nature says that that video from Sotheist is one of the stupidest videos they've ever seen. I haven't actually seen it, so I don't know, but they weren't impressed anyway.
Well, it kind of depends. It sort of depends on the level that people. If vegans are talking about the climate crisis in terms of just how the climate crisis affects humans, then then he's got a point. But I'm saying that's not what we should be doing.
Well, if people are talking about just how climate crisis affects humans, they're basically nuts, aren't they? I mean, they're just basically nuts and totally out of touch with reality. I mean, it's not even a vegan position. It's a factual position. The fact that sort of allegedly 100 species a day are going to the wall in terms of extinction. The fact that we are dependent on sort of ecosystems to stay alive. Hello, I mean, those are facts. Those are actual, solid facts. We cannot shift, and when enough of the ecosystems go down and the rate of sort of destruction is going up exponentially, it's only a matter of time, and it gets less and less time until we've all gone to the wall. So I mean, they're just basically nuts and lazy thinking. I mean, really, it's this is serious, very serious sort of situation. Like I said before, it's like we're in a war situation. I know I frequently use sort of the war against animals as an analogy. Well, good grief. If people cannot see the catastrophic climate breakdown situation as we should be mobilising, whether it's the useless governments, or humanly, in local organisations, local groups, doing whatever we can, growing our own vegetables, doing our advocacy in whatever way we can. If people can't see that it's an actual war situation, I mean, what's it take? Did anybody see the footage about the floods in Spain a few days ago? They've got some colossal amount of rain was dropped in half an hour.
And the important thing a lot of flooding is actually caused by animal agriculture. I mean, for instance, in this country, sheep farming plays a big part in causing flooding. George Monbiot has written an interesting article on his website about this called Sheepwrecked, where he says that what happens is that the uplands where the sheep farming takes place, or a lot of it takes place, it should be tree covered. And that would, when all this heavy rain falls on the uplands, that would soak that all up and prevent it from going further. Because sheep graze there and they've destroyed all that, what happens is when it rains, it goes rushing down. And down in the lowlands, it actually destroys a load of agricultural land. So the net effect on food production is actually a minus because of sheep farming. Ignoring everything else. I mean, people shouldn't be farming sheep anyway, of course. But it has this. It's a really big cause of flooding, be a big cause of flooding as well. And whether that's the case in other countries, it may be other sorts of animal agriculture that's doing that, where land is degraded and there's no tree cover to absorb the rain when it comes down. So once again, we're back to the same old thing. We're here in this crisis because of speciesism. We're here in this crisis because of human supremacism. If people had been vegan back in the day, we wouldn't have the climate crisis. It would never have happened, because we would never have done the things that have brought the climate crisis about, because we'd have realised that those things have a far too harmful impact on other animals, and we wouldn't have done it. And so it's allowed us, human supremacism has allowed the human species to do the things that have harmed the planet, have harmed other animals, and hey ho, now, our own arse is being kicked because of it, and that's why everyone's waking up to it, of course.
It's interesting, isn't it? It's really interesting that people who are environmentalists and are really woken up to the climate crisis, such as people who support Extinction Rebellion and groups like that, are still not open to veganism. A lot of them, obviously there are some who are, but a lot of them are still very resistant to veganism. And it seems like, wow, if you're the people who really are concerned about climate crisis and doing something about it, and you're out there and you're active and you're protesting and whatever you're doing, yet you still have that block and that resistance to opening up to the whole the catastrophe that is animal agriculture, etc.
But I think that's a key point, and I think what it is, that just shows how deeply the human supremacy goes with people. That is, as Ronnie was sort of like alluding to, the human supremacy position. You can be an environmentalist and a human supremacist. I mean, taking it away somewhat, reframing it from veganism into human supremacy. And I find that kind of quite quite important. That maybe we should be sort of like framing more strongly in some senses. It's always like this sort of thing of, should we be doing the sort of like softly thing, or should we be sort of like going in there and saying, well, this is a human supremacy position? I think it's never going to be easy to sort of like change people's minds or get change to happen. But I think sort of like reframing it, or perhaps trying to use the human supremacist sort of like framing. I've only recently started to think about this. Would that actually make a difference? Particularly when you're talking to environmentalists. Of course, then you've got to sort of like, or the XR sort of like brigade. Then you've kind of got to think, well, do people actually understand outside of the vegan bubble? Do they understand sort of like the human supremacist concept? Is it that difficult? I don't know. But yeah, I think that's I think that's the only reason I can think of. And they're just sitting pretty. Just particularly a lot of the people that we talk to are going to be kind of like quite sort of like privileged, aren't they? Economically,
I think that's right. I think it's important to say that the emperor's got no clothes, isn't it? It's important that someone says that. It's important that we say that. There's no good is done by kind of not saying that. I think how you say it is kind of, you can go in all guns blazing and tell everyone their fortune, and then they're going to turn off. But I think that there are ways in which that these people can be spoken to. I mean, I'm involved in my local Extinction Rebellion group. I'm a bit on the fringe of it. I help them with media and stuff like that. I did a press release for them earlier today, and I involved in. We have a local Green Alliance that our vegan group are members of that, and I do quite a lot of stuff for them. And all the time, I'm putting forward about human supremacism and about the fact that it's other animals that suffer far more than humans because of this adverse human impact on the environment. All the time, I'm kind of putting that forward. But I think the thing is, because I'm kind of part of it, and because I help them, and because I do a fair amount for them, they listen to me more. They'll take that. I'm not someone just coming in saying this is what you should do, and not being part of it. I think you've kind of got to be part of it somehow to be kind of listened to. And I think there are quite a lot of them that kind of are vegan. I remember going on the reason I went on a Extinction Rebellion march in Birmingham, was it 2 or 3 years ago, and that they had a big die-in in front of the council house, you know, the big kind of, I suppose it's like the equivalent of the town hall in Birmingham, really. And we all lay there, and I thought afterwards I could hardly get up. I was down there so long, like pretending to be dead. And we gave out vegan leaflets to people on the march, and about half of them said they were vegan already. To be honest, I was really surprised by how many said, and it tended to be the younger ones that said, "Oh, I'm already vegan. I'm already vegan." We were really surprised. There was a few of the older ones who said, "Oh, I don't want that leaflet." You know, they're a bit like that. But I was really surprised that there were more there that were vegan than I actually expected.
It's a fair point about what you said there, Ronnie, about they're more inclined to listen to you because you're involved with them already. You've got that trust. You've built up a relationship, a rapport with trust, and I suppose they're more likely. And that would go back to what Steve Best talks about with alliance politics, wouldn't it? And maybe trying to get people on board who fit more with our values, and trying to kind of work with other people.
That's it. It's not just a cynical thing of I'm going to go in there cynically and get those people to be vegan. No, it's important to support what they're doing, because like what they're doing, although they might be not, you know, their main focus isn't other animals, but what they do, if they succeed in what they're trying to bring about, that will benefit other animals tremendously. It'll benefit other animals kind of more than humans, because other animals are more harmed by it in the first place. So there's it is important to support those things for their own, for their own value as well.
Well, I'm just wondering. I mean, I think that's completely right. By sort of like, and I was always inspired by what you said about Ronnie. Working with local groups. That's kind of like sort of informed my own sort of like current mode of activism to a large extent. And what I think is that you can sort of get involved with them, and then, as you say, slightly sort of like, they know and they trust you, and they're more likely to listen to what you say rather than you're just somebody that's sort of like being parachuted in. And I think that's really important. And I had a concept from a sort of, maybe I'll run it past you guys as a sort of like a form of sort of like advocacy that I thought was that I'm going to give a try. Is that in one of my local parks, they've got some sort of like old buildings, and they've been running some sort of like pop-up cafes there. And I thought, what about with the sort of like, I've recently met somebody who's sort of like through these other sort of like activities, who is like a vegan cook. And, this notion of sort of like, maybe that we could get together a new group, and do like vegan pop-up community cafes in this sort of like venue, sourced perhaps from sort of like local allotments and this and that and the other. Have a very, very, very strong line on veganism, and also maybe use it as an opportunity for sort of like, vegan outreach, or maybe little teach-ins or something like that, because you might have the venue. I mean, I've still got to talk to everybody about this. And then you could have the sort of the concept of paying it forward, so that if people, have got some money, they can sort of like pay forward for people that can't sort of afford food. And then also, if you had sort of like leftover food, that you could take it to people within the local community, cycling obviously, or something like that, who, you'd sort of like identified as being kind of, well, who needed food basically. So that was something I just sort of like dreamt up as a result of being kind of like in this sort of like different sort of space really of community-based activism, which is largely around food and growing stuff. And then I spoke to somebody else who I know is as a vegan activist about something slightly different, and he mentioned that he's actually had money, he's actually had funding from the $1 Million Vegan for something similar but a bit smaller scale from this, which was basically providing vegan food in a community centre. I'm not sure if it was a one-off event or it was, like an ongoing. I get the feeling it might have been one-off, but I don't actually know, because I only had the conversation this afternoon. So I'm just wondering if that might be sort of like, obviously something in its own self, but if you could then start to use the venue for vegan-based sort of, basically outreach events, and really just start to really put the message forward consistently. I don't know. I mean, it just makes me think that that's something. I'm sure people have tried it before. but it would be worth giving it a bit of a crack. I'm going to try and see what I can do with that one. So
I really love that idea, Pamela. I think that's great. Real community. And not like you said, you've been in the community and you're coming from that place, like you're in it and you're involved, and this is what's coming up. So I think that's a great idea. It's not like you're coming in from afar and going, oh, how can I go in and tell everyone what they need to be doing. You're actually immersed in it, and you're getting creative within that space. And I think that's exactly what grassroots is, isn't it? It's that community feel and doing what you feel around it on the ground in that moment. I think that's brilliant. I love it.
Yeah, it's excellent. What we need is vegans to do it everywhere, of course. These examples of what could happen in every town, exactly. in every city, in every suburb of every city. That this is what we need. We need more vegans to be activists. We need more vegans to get involved in outreach, get involved in spreading the vegan message in whatever way they can. We need people to instigate those things. It's really important to be an instigator as well as an activist, an instigator, an organizer, whatever. That's kind of what we're lacking. Things don't happen unless somebody says, "Hey ho, I'm going to do this." I'm not going to wait for anyone else. I'm going to do that myself. And what happens is, I think we have so many vegans that wait for other people. They wait to see who else is organising something, and they'll all go along to. Like a big event. I mean, this is one of the reasons I think why Camp Beagle is so successful. I mean, total solidarity with Camp Beagle. But I think what happens is because people can just go along there, and there's loads of people there already. They don't have to organise anything. Oh, we'll just go there, and people go there from all over Catastrophe, and that's great as far as it goes. But really, what I'd like those people to do is think about. Okay, when I get back from Camp Beagle, what can I do in my own area to promote veganism? What can I do in my own area to instigate veganism? Because I think the best way of doing things is to say to people, it's not to have a meeting and try and organise everything, because, in my experience, not a lot comes from that. The way to do it is to say, I'm doing this particular thing. I'm going to be doing this thing. I'm going to be doing this leaflet delivery. I'm going to be doing this information stall. I'm going to get involved in this. I'm going to do that. And who's coming with me? You are the vegans that live here. Who's coming with me on this? That's the way to do it. That's the way to kind of, instigate those things. And we need more vegans everywhere, in every location, doing that. And if we get enough, and that's the key to me, that's the key to everything. If we get enough people doing that, then we've got, we've got some chance of, combating the climate crisis. We've got some chance of eventually achieving animal liberation. If we don't get that, if we don't get enough vegans coming like local, stimulators of action, then it's not going to happen. To me, that's absolutely key.
Well, to follow on from that, one of the things I was thinking was, if this project did happen, and was successful, then maybe it could be a sort of like a little bit of a template, that you just sort of like figured out the methodology, that then you could sort of, have that available for other people, like, start your own sort of like vegan pop-up. We got our funding from this, we did our, got our supplies from that. We, the key person to find is somebody that can sort out the cooking, what our problems were X, Y, and Z. Kind of use it like that as well. But if there's actually a pot of money available, which this contact of mine says is, for that kind of a project, that's also very interesting, because that's the $1 million vegan lot who funded the stuff that Laura was talking about in Palestine, wasn't it? It was some sort of, I can't remember the actual details of it. But
there's Veg Fund as well. Veg Fund or stuff like that.
I'm not quite sure of the details of this one, but you're absolutely right. Yeah.
Oh, we're really interested to hear how that goes, Pamela, and maybe you can then, exactly share what you learn and inspire others to kind of do similar things.
Blood, sweat, and tears.
Yeah, I know.
It's really a great project, because you combine all the vegan and environmental outreach with mutual aid for those humans in your local community that they need food. What worries me, it would be great to see projects like that all over the place. do we have the time?
Well, we do. Do we have the time not to do anything? I mean, the thing is, the system is collapsing. The reality is the system is collapsing.
I think
we don't have the time to do anything, or we have the time to just do something. It's not going to solve everything.
No. But I was just thinking, on top of that, don't we also need the campaigns? I mean, the activists that do the so-called extreme stuff. So the passers-by, those that cannot go to their job that day because the street is blocked, have this feeling of emergency. Because it feels that right now we should do like everything together and even more.
Yeah, but a key point for what I had in mind was that it wasn't just about providing the food. There would be an absolutely rock solid sort of like campaigning aspect within the context of providing that food. You know, so basically they weren't going to get away from the table or whatever, or the environment without being sort of like really bashed over the head with like, you know.
No. I absolutely love the plan. I just had the feeling
them
that
to their chair.
lately people are critical about campaigning too, and I just think that we should combine everything.
Yeah, I think Oh, sorry, Pamela, carry on.
No, you carry on. I'm just agreeing that
I was going to say that different people are cut out for different things. We need to be doing, you know, we need to be getting active in, you know, some people want to go, you know, some of the things Animal Rebellion have done have kind of really drawn public attention to the problem of animal farming, you know, and there's people that are drawn to those type of actions. That's kind of where that's what kind of gets them, you know, kind of going. And you know, different people are good at different things. So I think we need a whole level of different types of actions, because those people, all right, those actions do annoy some people, and some people get, you know, angry when they can't get home in time to see Love Island or whatever shit they're watching on the telly, but whatever, you know, bollocks they're doing in their life, you know, that will happen. But are those people going to care anyway? And because there may be some people that are potential people that would care, and that would wake them up. You know, that would make them think. And I think that's what happens. Although, you know, I think there's been some research done that shows, although the actions of groups like Extinction Rebellion tend to be generally unpopular, you know, the issues that they're campaigning for tend to somehow be made more popular, because gets people thinking about them, you see. And they're not really, I don't know whether they're really there to be popular anyway, are they? They're there to kind of, you know, wake everyone up. Yeah.
That's a key point, Ronnie, because the Extinction Rebellion and also the Insulate Britain campaigners are not to get popular support. It's specifically to force the government into some sort of substantive action on catastrophic climate breakdown. And the way they're doing that is by economic disruption. And it's guaranteed. It's not aimed at sort of like getting popular support. Number two, with the media sort of like, you know, demonizing them, it's never going to have popular support. And number three, the American civil rights movement in the 1960s, local people, the local press, you know, like I can't remember, I just saw something very recently, like basically about 60% of the people said they were too extreme, you know, they should try different methods. And basically the whole sort of like playbook of what people are now saying about any kind of like slightly effective activism was said in the 1960s about the American civil rights movement. Okay, so, you know, I think, you know, popularity is not the thing. And as you say so rightly, you know, about, you know, Extinction Rebellion, whatever you think about it, it's like certainly shifted the conversation around catastrophic climate breakdown. So well done them, you know, super well done. I think they were key in that.
I think that's right. I think that, you know, the problem for Extinction Rebellion and Animal Rebellion is that they're up against a government whose ideology is absolutely opposed to what they want, and this is the problem. And so it's important to kind of to kind of try and create a government that would be more amenable to those demands, you know, by changing ordinary people so that what people do at the ballot box is different, and who they vote for is someone that's kind of more more favourable to progressive change. So I think you need to, the problem needs to be attacked from both ends, really, because because not all big civil disobedience movements like that kind of have succeeded. I mean, C&D, for instance, where there was civil disobedience connected with that, Committee of 100 and all that. I mean, C&D didn't succeed in their objective to end for nuclear disarmament at all. So these things aren't always guaranteed to succeed. Yeah.
But I mean,
yeah.
we can do all sorts of different activism, because this popped through my letterbox the other day. I don't know if you can read it. Can you read it? Hang on, that way. So it says, now recruiting at Westerly. Can you see it?
Yeah.
Guess what Westerly is?
Like a butcher.
Yes, it's a butcher. So it says butchers starting at £10 an hour for unskilled, rising to £16 an hour with experience. Abattoir workers, blah de blah de blah. Anyway, so and then it's got a very helpful phone number 0117 957 1919. It says call. So I mean, you could definitely do some sort of like activism, if you wanted to make a phone call or just do something about that. I think you can be creative with your activism and do all sorts of different things if you've got. I mean, maybe that sounds a little bit trivial, but I think it's quite interesting. So, I think there's lots of things that we can do.
I think nothing is trivial if many people do it.
Where's Brian?
He's just been having a little toilet somewhere, I think.
Has he not? not on your shoes, Wendy, hopefully.
No, he was here a minute ago, Dave, to be honest. He was sitting here a minute ago, but I don't know where it's just, hey, Bri, are you around?
I mean, the key is for people to get, the key is we need more vegans to get active in whatever rocks their boat in terms of activism to do it, and it doesn't have to be anything. You're only going to really get a minority that are going to do like the risky things, like chain themselves in the road or whatever, glue themselves to the wall of McDonald's and things like people have done. But there's some real low key things, like distributing leaflets and running a stall where you're giving out food samples to people, and there's all these things that that are like kind of low aggro or no aggro activities that anyone can do. Even people that don't want to be in trouble, that don't want to kind of have the police arrest them or anything like that. There's something for everyone. It's something for everyone. It's just a question of people getting active. To not have this thing about that veganism is just about what I don't do. I don't buy this and I don't go there. That it tends to be like all about what people don't do, what they avoid. And, we need to change it from a philosophy of avoidance, which I don't think it ever was anyway, but people tend to think of it that way. Change it from, just avoiding things until to be a movement of people that actually, promote veganism and actually try to spread the message. Because it's about everyone. It's not just about the individual. Aren't I good? I don't contribute to the oppression of other animals. So aren't I a goody-goody? Well, that's no good when so many other people still do that, and we've got to go out and change those people. It's really important. We've got to change the mindset of people throughout society. We've got to change the mindset of vegans as well, so that people, vegans need to kind of accept that an essential part of veganism is to be an activist. It's really important that we kind of get that into the heads of all vegans, and if we do that, then we I think we can really turn things around.
Yeah, good luck with that, Ronnie. I don't want to be a killjoy here, but it's
you have been already, Roger, haven't you?
Yeah, it's 7:15, and we're still on page 2. So what are we going to do?
I'm booking Pamela in until Christmas.
I don't think we've got time to do this series.
How many pages more are there? How many pages more are there of it?
Well,
this is the recap.
18 pages. It said at the bottom of the screen, 18 pages. Yeah.
Is that, we'll be here for.
And if
the world will be ended by the time we get to the end of it, won't it?
So the choice is yours, isn't it? I mean, that's the choice, really. That's the choice.
I mean, I think the important thing is like we know that this is like the most terrible shit. We know that, and I mean, you know, really what you're going through, Pamela, is more the kind of the finer detail of how terrible it is. You know, we all know that this is a terrible thing that's going on with the climate crisis. You know, we know that to a very large extent it's caused by animal agriculture, by the depletion of the oceans, and it's also caused by the burning of fossil fuels as well. And so what we need to do is we need to get active in combating those things. We need to get active in educating people to go vegan, and we need to get active in promoting renewable energy and doing something about people, promoting public transport, all these things that kind of will reduce emissions and will enable the planet to pull down, more carbon from the atmosphere. We know, the focus needs to be on what can we do. We kind of all know that there's a horrendous problem, even though we might not all know the finer details of that. And we know what the solution is. The solution is to a very large extent is to educate people to go vegan, and really that's what us all as vegans should be doing in one way or another. We should be campaigning in one way or another. That's the answer, really. It's like, let's be solution focused.
Well, I think
doesn't anyone get them?
Here's some good phrases here, Wendy. What did Mark Beckhoff say? He said radvocate, didn't he?
Radvocate.
Yeah.
So a radical advocate, and zoothanasia for zoos who talk about
euthanasia. That's right. Yeah.
Who kill the other animals and call it euthanasia. He calls it
going
zoothanasia.
back to this one, which is referencing what Ronnie said, is that it's a major problem getting vegans to be active as we know in the sense of active as we mean it, and then the activists who you do get are not really on board with us in this conversation anyway. So that's a second kind of problem. There's not a great kind of generational dialogue. I found a lot of resistance, in fact. And I don't know whether it's my fault for coming over as a boring old fart or a bit preachy or something, or lecturing people. But I've tried to introduce.
You're only young, Roger. You're a young bloke, aren't you?
No. Everybody calls me Gramps on TikTok. I know, but the point is, on a serious note, Mr. Lee. On a serious note,
I'd say they call you worse than Gramps, mate, on TikTok.
But it is, and I suppose that every generation of a movement kind of reinvents the wheel to that extent. But I was rather hoping to have some kind of generational kind of dialogue, if only to kind of help them not make all the mistakes that we made in a way and all that. But I don't really think that they're that interested. They've just got their own kind of. I mean, at the moment, you've got a lot of welfarism come into the movement. You've got a lot of right-wing values. You're getting a lot of interesting people like Peter Singer again. It's all very weird. It's almost as though we're kind of treading water as a movement in these kind of senses.
Well, that's why people need to be re-radicalised on every sort of different level, and there's only going to be a minority that are into that, aren't they? And that's another reason to sort of like make inroads into sort of like the non-vegan community, who might potentially be a bit more, perhaps not, but they will certainly be larger. They might be a bit more on sort of like radical sense, or have some understanding of things in that sort of progressive sort of way, more so than the majority of vegans, who are exactly as you said, Roger. They just sort of, everybody knows, la la la, charity, la la la, all that sort of stuff. So,
Things have changed, but it's only ever a small number of people that have really changed things, to be honest, isn't it? There's a saying, who was it said that most things are just changed by a small number of active people, and that's kind of true. So it's kind of, it's probably the case that the vast majority of vegans are never going to be active, and then they're just going to like kind of be.
I think it was Margaret Mead, I think.
Yeah.
Margaret Mead, that's Margaret Mead. Most vegans are just going to be like, whooping for joy that there's been a McDonald's bought out a vegan burger and like all that kind of stuff. I mean, that's the latest controversy, isn't it, about the Mac vegan thing? But as long as we have a substantial number of vegans, we're not going to get everyone. We're not going to even get the majority. But if we, as many as possible that we can get to be active, and to have a high level of action, because that's the thing. If we have a relatively small number of highly committed, highly active people, can change things. That's what we need to act. It's just that we haven't got enough. We haven't got enough of those, highly committed people. But we've just got to work on getting them, work on encouraging people to kind of take up that role everywhere. And I think that's the answer. We can't worry too much about those vegans that we want as many as possible to come along, but we've got to accept that there are those that kind of won't. And I think it's a shame for them, because like this is the greatest struggle that's ever been fought against the greatest oppression that's ever existed, isn't it? This is like Armageddon, isn't it, or whatever, in terms of like totally changing. We have a Nazi species more or less that's kind of jackbooted over the earth. That's the human, of course. Over all the other animals, the world is occupied by under a tyrannical reign.
The human right, as you say.
The human right, yeah. And to resist that, to fight that, to defeat that, to achieve liberation for all the other beings that have been oppressed by our species. Isn't that like, a kind of wonderful thing to live your life for? That like I kind of lived and acted for the most fundamental and most important revolutionary change that ever came about in the history of the world, and ever will come about in the history of the world. Isn't that, instead of just living for nothing and dying for nothing, just doing like tiny nonsense, do you know what I mean, to fight and to struggle for this such a massively important cause? Isn't that like a really important thing that people could do? And then when they're dying, they can think, well, yeah, at least I kind of, I did that. I was part of that, and my life was of value because I did that. And that's what people need to be thinking. Be part of this, massively important change against, to turn around this unbelievably horrendous oppression that's been going on for so many centuries.
I admire your optimism, Ronnie, and I just realised that I must be pessimistic today because I've been thinking, yeah. But Wendy and Nella, we've got a show here brewing. By the looks of it, in terms of Catastrophic and activist.
How do I get to be one of these porn activists then? That's what I want to know. Is it? Are they taking applications? No. There is. I mean, there was. I mean, it was really started by. By the idea that we do need some money in the movement. It's a difficult issue, isn't it? Because I'm not quite sure whether. I always remember when Patreon started. I remember Colleen Patrick Goodrow was one of the very early vegans on it, and she said that she needed $10,000 a month to do her podcast, and I could never get my head around why that was, but I don't think I understand. I don't understand. Yeah. See, I think I'm going to be the male Tash Peterson. I think I'm going to put on a posing pouch, get a placard, and go in McDonald's, and see, make my fortune that way,
Please, Ronnie, when you wear your posing pouch, can you wear one with little goggly eyes on and a little face?
I had a posing pouch once. Somebody bought me one as a joke. A red one it was. It wasn't. It was too small though. It was only extra large. It's too small, so I couldn't wear it.
Okay, folks. I think we've come to the end of the show now. I think now we're talking about Ronnie Lee's
just getting started.
I think it's time to go.
The show's getting interesting towards the end.
So, Pamela, it looks like you're going to have to come back and suffer us all again, I'm afraid. maybe what we should do is not do. Maybe what we should do is not do an update and just start where you ended up, because we'll never get to it.
But you can never assume that the person that's watching the video is sort of like up to speed with everything. But I'm cool with that. I'd just like to make one point actually about the whole sort of like capitalist sort of like
the Ronnie burger. It's more. I think it's probably more a hot dog, wouldn't it? To be honest.
Yeah. All right, Ronnie.
Because I discovered something really horrible recently. Very, very horrible. I was excited because there's going to be a vegan fair in Bristol, a vegan something festival. So I sort of approached them and I said, oh, do you need any sort of like, speakers or activists and this and that? And I could not believe the response I got. They said, well, and it's actually in the sort of the centre of town. And they said, well, we're not allowed, we're not being allowed. A condition of our sort of like, having this fair or festival is that we're not allowed to have any activists, vegan activists or charities. So I've been trying to follow that one up with the actual space that is doing that, which is some massive corporation typically. And I've got nowhere. But I think that absolutely typifies another hideous stream of capitalism, being vegan capitalism, being absolutely antithetical to vegan activism. This time they're going to have all these vegan stalls, but no activists.
So is it just food, Pamela? Are just going to have food stalls, are they? Is that it? And clothing, I suppose.
I don't know. I don't think
a similar thing happened local to me as well. A very similar thing. They were having a vegan market, and they were really adamant they wanted no activists and wanted nothing to do with any activism.
The answer is to get it. Yeah.
Can you get outside the gate and just do leafleting outside the gate?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Get outside the gate and give leaflets to people.
I know, and I've already considered that. But I think it's also a very concerning sort of pointer to the annexation of veganism by capitalism, because that's really basically a big F off to the actual principles of veganism. And I think it's absolutely diabolical, because most sort of like vegans that sort of trundle up to this, as you say, with this vegan market, they're going to be like, oh, vegan chocolate cake, hooray. And, if they haven't even now got the chance.
I think you should chain yourself to the door panel so they can't get in.
It's not a door, it's an actual space. It's
Throw yourself in there.
It looks like a shopping centre, and it's all sort of like open, but that's not actually public ground. It's owned by some massive property corporation. That's what it is, And I've already thought about going down there with, but I think it's the principle as well. How dare they say that? How dare they? It's disgusting. I bet it's the same.
Because the main interest is money. The main interest is money, isn't it? Really, that's why they're saying that.
Yeah, I understand. Interest is money, but I think it goes deeper than that as well. I find it really toxic. I find it. Well, it's another reason why vegan capitalism is absolutely, antithetical to.
But if you do go outside and you give out leaflets, or you go in there and leave leaflets and stuff about veganism, what you want to do is people go in there, and there may well be a lot of non-vegans go in there. You want those people to become ethical vegans, don't they, or like proper vegans? Because there's no such thing as unethical veganism, is there, or non-ethical veganism? And so you can kind of subvert it. You can subvert it by going in there and giving people information, or being outside giving information. And that's the response, isn't it?
Yeah, of course I can. And I wonder why they haven't thought about it, because there are no gates. It's just part of the sort of main kind of when you've got buildings with shops and public.
All you do is you make all your leaflets into paper planes and you wang them in there.
Well, you can just wang yourself in there, can't you? With
you can walk around and give leaflets out to people in there. What they're going to do?
Sort of very large banners, some 30-meter banners that somebody might be gifting you. I mean,
get Ronnie down in his posing pouch. That'll go.
That'll clear the place. Like, pay for me to come at the end when they want everyone out of there.
There is an interesting question by Liz Fox. at 7:28. Should we address this now or next time?
I wonder if Lewis is watching this behind, because I think the extinction was mentioned quite a while ago. I wonder. I'm just curious. I don't know.
No problem.
Lewis, are you there now? Are you there now, Lewis? I just wonder.
I mean, I'd like to address this. The thing is that extinction cannot be separated from the suffering of the individual animals in the process of extinction. This is the thing. That this is the thing that extinction has happened. As animals go extinct, they're going to suffer and they're going to die prematurely, aren't they? They're going to die because they can't find their food. They're going to die because they can't. Their habitat's been destroyed, and so the extinction of animals does impact on those animals as individuals. And an example of the huge, of course, loads of animals suffer and are slaughtered from species that don't go extinct. I mean, like the most, one of the most oppressed animals in the world is the battery hen, but they're nowhere near going extinct, are they? So it's not just extinction, but extinction does include within it the suffering and the slaughter of individuals. So that's what my answer would be to that.
I think what they're getting at is the point that you made in Extended Circle, though. I think, Ronnie, that the individual whale who dies, if she was the last one, she wouldn't care about being the last one in terms of.
You don't know that. Nobody knows. It's just a small. I mean, I've thought about this, and nobody actually knows. We don't know. Maybe they would have some horrific sense as their numbers dwindled, whether they were whales or some sort of like insect. Maybe their numbers. Maybe they would have some sort of like emotional, psychic, whatever sense that their numbers were smaller and smaller, that they could not, and they were on their way out, both individually and as a species.
Yeah, it's a fair point. I think, to be honest.
I think that's fair. And also social animals wouldn't be able to find others of their kind, and that would impact them. And that's true. I think there is that, and Pamela's right. But also the suffering of why are they becoming extinct? They're becoming extinct because things are being done that are killing those animals and depriving all those animals as individuals. So it does come down to the individual as well.
And let's not, I think these, again, it's a very polarized question, this either or. Let's just sort of like open up our minds a bit and maybe think as well as, it can be this and it can be that. Let's try and sort of like, have a bit more of a nuanced way of looking at stuff rather than trying to sort of make ourselves, right or wrong.
And also in the sense of, I talked about in the sense of this thing about burning, our houses on fire. In other words, our species is at risk, our house is on fire. Whereas, like, we've burnt down the houses of all the other species, so it's kind of in that context I was talking about it as well.
Liz has the final say.
Brian will be saying something about his food.
About his dinner.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. He will.
Oh, wow.
He's looking at me. He's sitting on the stairs, really like looking at me very intensely. Hey, Bri. I am coming soon. I promise. It's like yeah, whatever.
right, people. We ought to wrap up really, and thank everybody for bearing with us yet again. And that was part 3 that never was really. I think you might say. So we'll do part 3/4. Soon. I think we've got our next 2 shows lined up. I think so. It'll probably be in 3 or 4 weeks.
People have to wait with bated breath, won't they, to the next one of these?
Or something like that. Yeah, kind of. Especially, it'll give you time to order your posing pouch anyway. Ronnie,
the one with the eyes on. The one with the eyes on.
The googly eyes.
The googly eyes. Yeah.
Do have googly eyes.
Yeah. Wendy will be posting some googly eyes to you tomorrow, I imagine.
Yeah, because I'd already have the nose, wouldn't I? So I just need the eyes either side of it, really, wouldn't I?
Right. Okay, people. Okay, I'm gonna bring this to a close because Ronnie's off now. Ronnie's off.
Listen.
Oh, thank you, everyone.
All right, thanks everyone.
Bye,
for bearing
thank
with us.
you.
Thank you for all your comments, and thank you.
Putting up with Roger.
Thank you, Pamela, and Ronnie as well.
You've always been a very bad man, Ronnie Lee.
Brian, do you want to say bye?
I know. I
quick?
don't understand why people think that. I'm completely at a loss.
Brian's just
There
come
we
and
are.
say goodbye as well. Oh, you missed him.
Oh, next time.
Hey, Brian.